Hey guys, welcome to the RotoPros pre-lock show for this extra early 12:35 p.m. slate. We've got some difficult choices here. I'm not really sure how to sort through this one. There are a couple of offenses that definitely make sense, but on the pitching front, this is definitely going to be a challenge. So just kind of try to talk through some of these guys. We've got Noah Syndergaard and Carlos Martinez going head-to-head on the high end. And I think generally this would be just too much to pay for both of them. Syndergaard has been a little bit different this year. He's not throwing quite as hard. He's trying to conserve energy to be able to go deeper in games and I guess last longer in the season. And by doing that, he's actually throwing less strikes. I guess he's been trying to stay on the corners of the strike zone more, because he's just not throwing as hard. He's a little more concerned about getting hit too hard. So his strikeout numbers are actually up by trying to get batters to chase more. His walk numbers are up, and the velocity's down. So at this point, I don't really know how to evaluate Noah Syndergaard. He's still definitely very, very good. This is a pretty tough matchup in St. Louis for him. So let's see what we've got for lineups. We do actually have most of the lineups out already. And a lot of these offenses are in pretty good weather conditions too. I'll get to that also. But we don't have any significant weather in St. Louis. As for the Cardinals lineup, Carpenter, Pham, Martinez, Ozuna, Fowler. So the same top five in the order. Yadier Molina is out of the lineup today. So that's a little bit of a boost for Syndergaard. I think it's an okay price. But I don't know where the pitching value is. Like, there isn't a single guy here on this slate that I think is a really strong value. And then I guess it kind of just comes down to what offenses are you fitting and which pitchers make that work. So I'm kind of I feel okay about Syndergaard. I think this slate might make more sense to just go really cheap at pitching and stack the Yankees. Because the Yankees have been really, really good basically the whole season, but especially lately. And the wind is blowing out at Yankee Stadium. Kyle Gibson is a ground ball pitcher, so that's a little bit of a challenge. The Yankees should still hit some fly balls against him anyway, because they hit fly balls against everyone, and they usually hit them pretty far. So we should be looking at some homers from the Yankees. I'm a little concerned about ownership there, but I'm kind of all over the place here. I'm going to be all over the place, I think, for most of this episode, because it's a hard slate to figure out. So I guess the way I'll do it is kind of lay out the potential routes, and then we can kind of pick and choose which route makes sense. It could be a slate to just diversify a little bit too and just use a few different routes. I don't have a lot of conviction in one or the other. But as always, if you're stacking, then you're creating the most GPP upside. And I guess that's the only way to do it. So if you want to use the expensive pitchers, I'll start there, or I guess I'll go back there. Syndergaard, I think, is a better choice than Carlos Martinez. But I do think both are good choices. The concern with Martinez is always if he's facing lefties. He's a lot better against right-handed batters than left-handed batters. The Mets don't really have a lot of lefties in their lineup. It's 4-4. Nimmo, Bruce, Adrian Gonzalez, then Asdrubal Cabrera is a switch hitter. The other four guys are right-handed. That's really all the Mets have. They couldn't really stack up more lefties than that, unless they used Jose Reyes over Rosario or Todd Frazier. But yeah, it's kind of an even lineup for Martinez. He is at home. This Mets lineup is decent. Michael Conforto is out of the lineup, actually, so that's a boost for Carlos Martinez. So, yeah, maybe him and Syndergaard are similar plays for their prices. I think they're both usable. I don't think they're both great plays. But if you want to use them together, there's really only one offense that makes any sense. Let me see. Yeah, there's just about one offense that fits. Well, there's a couple, but only one that fits that makes sense to me. So I think I'm ignoring the Tigers and the Pirates for offense today. They're not in very favorable hitting conditions. It's a pitcher's park in Pittsburgh. moderate temperatures there in the 50s, no wind effect really. Two pitchers that aren't that good, but two pitchers that also get a lot of ground balls, don't strike guys out. Just kind of a low event game overall. Shouldn't be a ton of runs, shouldn't be a lot of strikeouts. I think it's a game just to like not really use too much of anybody. But the cheaper offense to pair with the expensive pitchers is probably the Reds offense. So Sean Newcomb has been really, really good in terms of his strikeout numbers this year, but his walk numbers are also up. And his swinging strike percentage is actually the same as last year. So it could be a bit of a mirage that he's striking out so many more guys this year. Newcomb always strikes guys out. That's not really too much of a factor for how many runs the other team is going to score, because Newcomb is also prone to walking a lot of guys and giving up some hard hits, giving up some homers. So the Reds are different today because Eugenio Suarez is back in the lineup, and that's a huge deal against a left-handed pitcher. So this Reds lineup actually looks pretty good. There was a point last year where we had considered pitching in Cincinnati to be a negative matchup for a pitcher because the offense is about average and it is a hitter's park. Today, it's warm enough where definitely favorable hitting conditions there in Cincinnati. The only player missing from last year really is Zach Cozart, who's a decent hitter, but that's not enough to make this some great matchup. Suarez being back helps a lot. It was easier to pick on the Reds in terms of your pitching choices before that. So just looking up and down this Reds lineup, let's see. We've got Billy Hamilton leading off. Billy Hamilton is terrible, but if he gets on base, he can steal. So he's always worth using in a stack for sure. Peraza, kind of the same thing. He's not as bad of a hitter as Hamilton. He's not as good of a stolen base threat as Hamilton, but he's fine to include in stacks too. And then I really like the middle of the order. Votto, Duvall, and Suarez. Mesoraco is pretty cheap at catcher too. These guys are all reasonably priced, so you can fit them with both expensive pitchers. I think that's one potential route to go. There isn't really another offense that I like that fits in with the expensive pitchers. You can maybe try to cram the Phillies in there. I think you'd have to leave off Rhys Hoskins, maybe just leave off Cesar Hernandez. You can't get the full stack in with the Phillies, but you can with the Reds. And the same thing for the Braves too. You'd have to stack other players outside of the first five hitters. So yeah, the Reds are the only team that you can really fully stack with both Martinez and Syndergaard. I think that's definitely an option to consider. I'll probably do that for some percentage of lineups. Not a huge amount because it is the Reds offense. They're not that good, and Newcomb is decent. But that option, I think, is certainly viable. So in other combinations, we're going to need some cheaper pitching. And I guess I'll go to the other extreme with two cheaper pitchers and stacking the Yankees, because the Yankees are the most expensive offense, but they definitely have the highest expected output. I think the Braves are in a similar category against Homer Bailey in a hitter's environment. They have Ronald Acuna up now, and their offense was already doing well. So the Braves, good offense, good spot. Same for the Yankees. So the pitching choices I like with those teams, you probably can't use Martinez or Syndergaard unless you use a second pitcher that's really, really cheap. So Yankees with Syndergaard and Michael Fulmer, let's say, that doesn't really fit too well. You're going to end up with some pretty cheap plugs. So I think Ben Lively is actually worth considering today. I don't think he's very good. I would say he's an average at best pitcher, but he is striking out a few more batters this year. He's getting over 8 Ks per 9 innings. His swinging strike percentage is up a little bit. And this is an easy matchup against the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks offense is not very good. Paul Goldschmidt is a really good hitter. AJ Pollock is a decent hitter. David Peralta is a decent hitter. They have no other good hitters in their lineup. Chris Owings is good against lefties. Ben Lively is a righty, so that doesn't really matter. This is definitely not a very hard matchup. I think Lively could do well. I just think his price is too low. Like, he should cost probably in the 6,000s. Shouldn't be a great result. He probably scores 12 to 15 fantasy points on average, but he's only 4,900. So I think he's pretty safe. He's not that good, so it's not that safe. But if you're using a very cheap pitcher, I think he's by far the best choice. So the other options here would be Matt Koch, who's kind of like Ben Lively, actually, just kind of a worse version of him, where he's not going to strike a lot of guys out. Maybe he's a good contact manager, get some ground balls. Lively actually doesn't get any ground balls. But yeah, I think Koch is just kind of an unknown prospect that isn't very good, and he's on the road. He's not that much cheaper than Lively. So I would definitely take Lively over him. Homer Bailey is in a really tough spot, so I don't have interest there. If you can get to Michael Fulmer for cheap, I think that's worth considering. And then potentially also Kyle Gibson for leverage against the Yankees. So here's how I'll break this down. If you are stacking the Yankees, I think your best route to go is Lively with Syndergaard or maybe Lively with Martinez. If you're using some of the bottom of the order Yankees, so it's not a 1 through 5 stack, but you've got two or three out of Judge, Didi, Stanton, and Sanchez in there, and you can afford to go Syndergaard and Fulmer. I think that makes sense to do. And then if you're stacking the Braves, I think you can use Gibson and Syndergaard together, because if you're not going to have Yankees there, you're going to need them not to do well for those lineups to have any chance. And Kyle Gibson is only 5,100. He has become more of a strikeout pitcher since basically the All-Star break last year. So Gibson is probably still bad, but he's definitely less bad since he, I guess, changed up his pitch mix. He's throwing his curveball more. His slider just started being better for some reason. This year, the results have been kind of strange. His strikeouts are up and his walks are up. I don't think Gibson's good, but I think he's pretty close to average. So it's possible he has a good day at Yankee Stadium. There is some potential for strikeouts against the Yankee lineup, especially Stanton, but obviously a lot of downside for Gibson too. So for Braves stacks, I think you can use him because that's sort of a leverage play against the Yankees. No one's going to have Kyle Gibson today. For the season, Gibson is at 8.6 Ks per 9, 4.7 walks per 9, decent ground ball rate at 47%. And yeah, I mean, that it's not terrible numbers. So I think Gibson's okay, and he's just really cheap. So I'm not going to go out of my way to use him a lot. I think he could just make a couple lineups that don't have Yankees in them, and Braves would be the team to stack in those lineups because that's the only other team I really want to pay up for. So yeah, this is a bit messy. I'll just kind of summarize. I don't really, well, there are going to be some other teams to get to, but I'll summarize what I've got so far because try to keep this, I don't know, keep this from running off the rails too much. This is a difficult slate to figure out. But on the high end, I think you can use Martinez, but I prefer Syndergaard. For cheap, I like Ben Lively. I also like Kyle Gibson if it's obviously not a lineup that has Yankees in it. And that's a very, very high risk, high reward play because it's the Yankees offense in a game with the wind blowing out. So Gibson's definitely risky. And then Fulmer, if you can get up to Fulmer, I think that makes sense too. But Fulmer's probably just he's just kind of in no man's land, I think, for this slate, because you can stack some teams with both expensive pitchers, and you can also stack basically anyone if you get someone as cheap as Lively in there with an expensive pitcher. So I just don't think I'll end up using much Michael Fulmer. He doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. It's sort of a neutral matchup at Pittsburgh. So yeah, it's Syndergaard priority 1. I actually think Lively is my second favorite pitcher, then Carlos Martinez, and then I guess Kyle Gibson would be the leverage play. Jordan Montgomery, and I'll get more into offense with this. Jordan Montgomery should be pretty chalky. Yankee pitchers always seem to have excessive ownership, and I think the reason is because they're such big favorites that a lot of people just look at the Vegas line and just say he'll get the win, so I'm going to use him. Montgomery's price is a little bit high, I think, at 7,800, and the Yankees should win today, but Montgomery often just doesn't reach the 5th inning. He's not very good at going deep into games. He walks some guys, and they're usually pretty cautious with his pitch count just because he's not that good of a pitcher. He's like an average pitcher, and the Yankees have a really good bullpen, so they're quick to turn to those guys. So I think there could be some leverage stacking against Montgomery in a game where the wind is blowing out. The Twins have not released a lineup, though, yet. So maybe I'll come back to that one. Maybe in a few minutes we'll have a lineup. Oh, no, we do have a Twins lineup now. All right, so Twins lineup. Dozier, Mauer, Sano, Escobar. We don't have Rosario in there. Mitch Garver is playing catcher today over Jason Castro. He's batting fifth. This lineup is not very scary, but again, there is leverage here. I think Montgomery will be among the most popular pitchers on the slate. Ownership is definitely tough to gauge here. Like Montgomery could end up as the chalkiest pitcher if everyone just kind of splits their expensive pitcher exposure between Syndergaard and Martinez, and then at second pitching choice, they just all use Montgomery. That's possible. So I think making some twin stacks is a decent move. They're definitely not my favorite offense. In terms of just scoring runs to the Yankees and Braves, I think those are the two best spots today. I don't really like the Phillies that much because I don't think Matt Koch is really that bad. The Phillies offense is reasonably priced though. It's just if I'm going to pay up for offense, I really strongly prefer the Yankees and Braves. So Phillies is plugs. I think that's fine. But yeah, I think the Phillies are kind of just missing the cut here too. Kind of the same as Fulmer, where it's not enough savings to be able to pay up somewhere else, and it's expensive enough where there are just better choices in the same price range. So I'm heavily targeting the Yankees and Braves. I think those are the two best offenses. Not really looking at the Phillies. Going to have a decent amount of Ben Lively exposure, so not really looking at the Diamondbacks. And then the leverage stacks, I think the Reds could be – well, I'm not sure how highly owned Sean Newcomb will be, but no one's really going to use the Reds offense against him. So the contrarian picks would be the Reds and then also the Twins. Just kind of looking at potential for offense in the St. Louis game against the Mets. I mean, there's going to be low ownership there. You certainly won't see in a matchup of Syndergaard versus Martinez, no one's really going to use offense. But I think you can get the Twins and the Reds at just the same ownership, maybe even less. And I think the expected output for those two teams is way higher. So as far as a contrarian stack, the Reds and Twins, I think, are just better picks. All right. So if anyone has questions, let me know. I'm going to go through the plugs real quick that might work and then recap. Yeah, this slate is not – I think it's a slate with a lot of upside. It's definitely a slate to spread around your exposure a bit. It's hard to say if it's a good one or a bad one. I think it's okay though. I think it has potential. Is all I can really say about it. But yeah, looking at plugs here, there isn't really a lot. Like I think it's just going to kind of be the core stacks are going to make, and then using the players from those stacks and other lineups. I think that's going to be the lineup construction. The Tigers guys are a little cheap. I think they could be okay for plugs. Basically anyone on that team. Let's see. Gerard Dyson batting second. So if it's a lineup that doesn't have Ben Lively in it, Dyson batting second, 2,900 for the Diamondbacks. I think that's a good value play. Miguel Sano was a little cheap, 4,000. If you can fit him, I think he kind of just makes sense everywhere. And Eduardo Escobar batting fourth at 3,400. He's eligible at third base and shortstop. So I'll probably have a decent amount of him. Brett Gardner is a lot cheaper than the rest of the Yankees. So I think Gardner probably will be my highest owned Yankee player. The wind is also blowing out to right, and he's left-handed. So he may actually benefit from the wind more than the rest of the players. But the other Yankee power hitters hit the ball the opposite way plenty often too. So I guess not for that reason. Gardner's just cheap though. So he's probably a good value play. No one really in the Mets-Cardinals game, although I think Brandon Nimmo's okay. 2,900 leading off. Martinez is a lot worse against lefties. And Jay Bruce at 3,400. I think the lefties on the Mets, that's a decent source of plugs. They're priced down for Carlos Martinez, but lefties usually hit Martinez pretty well. So I'm just going to give you guys that are watching another couple seconds. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to cover. I know someone in the Slack chat had posted a lineup they were looking at. Let me just take a look at that really quick. So we've got some players in these lineups that aren't actually playing today. Jose Reyes is not in the lineup. But yeah, Brave stacks I think makes sense. I think you definitely want to stack though, and not just kind of have like a bunch of 2-man mini stacks just to maximize your upside. But Freeman and Albies just include more Braves there. And then I do like twin stacks, but the guys I would want there would be Dozier, Sano, Escobar, and I guess I'm not really sure who the fourth Twins guy would be. But Mauer I think is okay. Garver is okay, batting in the middle of the lineup. But if you're making a twin stack, you definitely want to have Dozier, Sano, and Eduardo Escobar in that stack. All right, I think that's going to do it. We'll be back 5 o'clock today for the main slate. So hopefully that was helpful. Good luck today, and thanks for watching. As you can see here, go to rotopros.com, find all the rest of our stuff there, and follow at RotoPros DFS on Twitter.